everybody. Welcome to tonight's Communications Department Zoom-torial. Doing things a little differently tonight. Typically in the Zoom-torials, I physically, walk you through doing something like our Canva ones that we've done here the past couple of months. But tonight I want to talk about something called community action roadmaps, which are really just a fancy way of saying, do you have a plan? So whether you're hosting an event or a program, creating that for your Grange, whether you as a Grange are trying to solve a community issue, or you're taking direct action in your community, this is applicable to any of these situations. So what you need to start with is understand your Grange's why, and then visualize how. Those are the two intro steps. I was going to do a PowerPoint, but since I was still putting this together about half an hour ago, I didn't get that far. So I might do that eventually and just have that ready for y'all. But so understanding your why is, what challenges do we and your Grange need to solve, and what do you need to achieve and address the challenges that you're seeing? And then you visualize how. So you take initiatives. What steps and tasks, or what are also called packages of work, are required to reach your objective? And then how do you set up a sequence of these packages that makes sense? This is all just a fancy way, again, of saying, do you have a plan? So often I think we like to be big picture thinkers in the Grange. We like to say, we would like to tackle this, and then don't think and outline steps that set us up for success. So the community action roadmap is just a document that lays out your tasks. It just says, here is the goal, and here are the ways that we're going to get there. And then taking a look at it and setting it up for future use and future successes. Once you kind of have the basic plan, you don't need to recreate the wheel every time you're going back to things, which I know contradicts everything I said last month in my beginner's mindset workshop, where I said, you'd like to recreate the wheel and we want to try new things. But this is a good way to say, if you're doing these kind of events over and over again, if you are taking direct action in your community because you've been approached because the Grange is the problem solver, this is the steps that will help you, reach the right people, contact the right people, and bring the right people in to help. So first you need an objective, which is also known as our vision or our mission. And it's basically asking, why do we as the Grange exist? Several years ago, the National Grange rewrote our own mission statement to better clarify the purpose of the Grange. And I know that there are individual Granges across the country who have written their own mission statements. There's one that they say that their mission for their Grange is to help connect families and children to agriculture. That is their Grange's purpose. There's another Grange that their mission statement specifically says they are there to perform community service to make their Grange, or to make their community better. That is their purpose. So you look at anything that you do, does it serve our mission, is the first question. And if it doesn't, that doesn't mean we're not going to do this, but it can be, why is this important to us at this time? So if your Grange's mission is to connect families and children to agriculture, and you want to come up with a program that is about, road safety, there is a way to fit that into your mission. And instead of about agriculture, it's connecting families and children to safety in rural communities. There are ways to make it work. And so maybe you need to adjust your Grange's mission a little bit and say, we're more about just serving families and children. And then anything can fit in there. So you want to look at your Grange's advantages. What do you do better, differently, or more efficiently than anybody else? And that can help define your mission, and your mission can help define your advantages. You know that your Grange is the place that people come when they have a community issue that they don't know how to solve. That might be something that your Grange is really good at. Your Grange might be really good at chicken barbecues, and that's good too. So when another organization wants to do a fundraiser, they might approach your Grange and say, hey, your chicken barbecue is amazing. How can we partner on this event? Or vice versa. You might want to fundraise for something, and you know that the Lions Club does fantastic chicken barbecues or ice cream or whatever. And so you can partner together to, increase both of your influence. And then you also want to look at your scope. So, which is, what are you doing or what are you not doing to help you achieve your mission? If you've set up this mission that our Grange is here to perform community service to make our community better, but everything that you do is simply to fundraise to keep your Grange alive, then we need to start asking the question of, okay, well, how can we move from sustaining to serving? How can we make these steps last longer? I'm getting rid of Post-it notes one at a time. So, some questions to ask are, what are we going to do to serve the people that are part of our scope? How are we going to get the money to do these things and spend it wisely? How will we meet our financial goals and obligations to better serve our community? And what should our Grange be doing internally to make sure that we're able to meet our own internal goals and our external goals? So often we look at that big picture of serving the community and we forget to take care of ourselves. Grange Hall's going into disrepair. Communities that have lost their Grange Halls because we weren't taking the time to make sure that we were staying and keeping ourselves healthy as well in our Grange, because so much of our money was going into the community. There's no shame when you're doing a fundraiser for an event to also make sure you say portions of this are going to stay with our Grange to keep us alive as well. So if you're like me, and I think many of you on this Zoom are, we are overcommitted, overextended, and somehow keep ending up as the person in charge. Raise your hand if that sounds like you. So these community action plans, these community roadmaps, whatever you want to call them, are just a well-designed plan that will make it easier for you to achieve your goals, track your progress, and to get more people involved. It's just a document, lays out the tasks, what needs to be accomplished, lays out the steps, and then also assigns timeframes for every step. So this can be an immediate plan. It can be a one-time event that you're doing. It can be a 5-year plan for your Grange. It can be a 50-year plan for your Grange. All of these can follow the same roadmap. It can be holding a town hall. It can be, one of the things that's affecting one of the areas where my local Grange is that they're building a highway and they want to put it through prime farmland. And so there are communities that want to combat this or figure out ways around this. And I think the Grange could be a great place to, put in local resolutions and to serve the community by saying, this is what your community is saying. We want our developers to listen to us. And so setting up a roadmap, roadmap for a highway, could be a great way to help local Granges figure out how to serve their communities and how to make their communities' voices heard. So how many of you have ever heard of SMART goals? Okay, well, that's the basic layout for a community roadmap. It's setting specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based goals. So I'll go over all this in a little bit. So if you didn't notice, that spells out SMART as an acronym. So setting specific goals. The narrower the goal, the better. For at least a short-term goal. For a long-term goal, it could be setting a specific goal that we are going to exist in 50 years. That is my goal. My long-term goal for our Grange is to exist for 50 years. Our short-term goal could be a fun fair. That's your short-term goal. And all of these goals exist simultaneously, and that's fine. And some of them feed into one another. You know, holding the short-term fun fair kind of goals is what allows you to achieve the long-term, I'm going to exist in 50-year goals. So they all kind of feed off of one another. Another specific goal you might set is to increase membership. Now, what you could do to make it the next step, which is measurable, is to say, we are going to increase our membership by 5% in the next year. And then you would lay out your steps to say, here's how we're going to achieve that goal. So measurable, what shows that you're making progress? What are your tracking methods? Are you just, something like membership is very easily trackable through your secretary's records. It could also be something like, we want to increase the people coming to our meals by 10% over the next year. So it would be tracking from meal to meal, if you do takeout meals or in-person meals, whatever, tracking the number of people that you currently have, or if you keep those records, and hopefully you do. So right now, you know that you have 200 people on average coming to your meals. Increasing by 10% would be moving to 220 people. So say you host a meal every other month, you keep those records. At the end of that year, did you achieve your goal of moving up to 220 people on average? Very measurable, very specific as well. So that specific goal of getting more people to attend can also then lead again to, we have more money in the bank now that helps us do our community service and feed our mission, and helps us look to the long-term goals of existing in 50 years. The A in SMART is attainable. Can you actually do what you want to do in the time frame that you've set? You don't want to set yourself up for failure. That being said, you don't also want to set yourself such a long time frame that you kind of peace out on the project for a while and come back to it. You don't want to become a procrastinator like me and try to fit a 5-year goal into 6 months. That's not going to help anybody, because that's not setting yourself up for success, which is why we have the steps to follow. With attainable, setting the smaller, more achievable goal makes progress look like it's happening faster, and therefore you're more motivated to continue. So you might have a long-term 5-year goal that you break down into, 6-month steps. So 5-year goal, we are going to reside our Grange Hall. That's our goal for 5 years, is that needs to be resided, whatever. So in 6 months along the way, you've set maybe fundraising goals, or you've set outreach goals, or you've set planning goals, whatever those smaller goals are. If you reach them, so let's say that you need to raise $30,000 across the next 5 years to reside your hall. I don't know how much it costs. I'm making it up. But I chose that number because across 5 years, that means you need to raise $6,000 per year specifically for that project, which means in 12 months, you need to raise $500 each month to put aside. So some months you might not meet that goal. You might not have that $500 that came in that month. So in the next month or the next 6 months, maybe, that you have to make up some lost ground. And stay motivated to keep this momentum. The R is relevant. Do your goals, like we said earlier, align with your Grange's mission? And do your mini goals align with the larger goal? So let's say your large goal is to make your Grange Hall more rentable, to make it accessible to the public, that you want to turn your Grange Hall into a revenue stream by people coming in from the outside. A step that might align with your larger goal is to install Wi-Fi in your Grange Hall and make it someplace that has internet access. That's a goal that aligns with the larger goal of making your Grange Hall rentable. A goal that might not align would be sending your officers to a leadership training. Is that a bad goal? No. I think it's a great goal to send your officers to a leadership training, but it just doesn't align with the goal that you've set of making your Grange Hall rentable. So if you want to achieve the send your officers to a leadership training goal, you just need to find a section to put that in, or make that its own goal, which is fine. You're going to end up with multiple road plans happening at once. Finally, the T is time-based. So set realistic, but potentially ambitious end dates for yourself. You don't want to set such long goals, again, like I said, that you're not going to achieve them, but you want to set them in a time that they're doable and they feel doable. So you need to identify and prioritize your goals. What can happen now? What is a 5, 10, 15-year plan? And on the larger plans, what can we start tackling now? These are also individualistic to your Grange, that setting up any kind of example is kind of hard. But they are all ways that you can serve your public. So if somebody in your Grange said, I think that we should be doing more in terms of making the public aware of who's running for office this year, that's a great way for you to set up a short-term goal and say, okay, is this something that we want the Grange to tackle? If your Grange's mission is we're a community-minded organization, public offices and voting is right there in being community-minded. So then you can set short-term goals of, okay, we need to figure out who's running for office. We are going to hold an in-person meet the candidates night. We are going to host a get out the vote style campaign to make people aware of when election day is. And we also want to see if we can long-term turn our Grange Hall into a voting place, a polling booth. All goals that feed that. And those are kind of vague, but also specific in that these are the steps that we need to take. And then each of those steps is going to have a set of sub-steps as well. So the first thing you need to do in your community action plan is to identify your resources. What do we already have? Who do we already have in place? Who do we know that can help us achieve these? And this is where you start to leverage the other people in your Grange. You as a Grange leader shouldn't be doing this all by yourself. So with your community relations, identify who in your community at large can offer what kind of support to your mission. And then decide who in our Grange should be the person that contacts them. For instance, you might know that Tammy has a great relationship with the mayor's office, so she should be the person to go in there, because maybe Pete doesn't have a great relationship with the mayor's office for some reason. Maybe he's gotten in trouble with the law one too many times. Maybe he's a little too opinionated. So he might not be the right person to send in to deal with these issues. And then also decide what strategy is going to be best to reach the people that you want to contact. I am a big texter. I am a big emailer. I really don't like talking on the phone that much. So if you know the people that you're reaching, you might know the best way to get in contact with them, or know how they're going to respond. There are people in your Grange who respond in different ways. And I think we all know that there are people who only email. There are people who will never answer a text message. There are people who would much prefer to be approached in person about things. So in general, what you're doing in each of these steps is use the talents of the people around you and decide who is strongest where. If I know that we're holding, say, back to a chicken barbecue, we're doing a chicken barbecue, and I know that Steve is great at being out on the grill, making the chicken, great. That's where I'm going to ask Steve to be. I wouldn't ask him, if he wasn't comfortable with it, to be in the kitchen making the pies for the afternoon. Um, I would make sure that his talents are where they need to be, where he feels appreciated, where he feels respected, and also you're able to, take take advantage of his talents. Um, by asking him. I think sometimes we make assumptions that, oh, well, they've always done this, so of course they want to do this, so we're just going to assign them to be in that spot. And maybe there comes a point where somebody says, I would really like to try something different at some point. I'm tired of making mashed potatoes. Um, but I can do other things. I think there are people who are afraid to speak up. So you can say, Pete, what would you like to do for this? And make sure that their voice is heard in this process. So the other thing with community relations is finding potentially a partner organization. If you're doing something like a Get Out the Vote awareness campaign, partnering with somebody like the Lions Club or your local fire company or somebody might be a great idea and a great way for you both to work together. Um, you are building a symbiotic relationship with them. We'll help you, you'll help us, we both grow from this. And if you're doing an awareness campaign, you automatically double or triple your reach for every new organization you partner with. Look how far your message spreads. At the National Grange, we were approached by Rural Minds to help amplify their message. And over the past year and a half of working with them, because of Grange members, their message is spreading much further than it would have on their own. Now, of course, they have other partners and they have financial resources that local Granges don't have or that they're able to offer local Granges, but they came to us because they knew that we were the voice for rural America, and we are the voice for rural America. So they approached us knowing that we would help get their message further than they would do it on their own. So there's no shame in doing that as a Grange and saying, we can't do this on our own, or we don't want to do this on our own, which is perfectly valid as well. So who can we find to help us with this? That might be a Boy Scout troop. That might be your local 4-H. That might be another Grange down the road to say, where we don't want to do this on our own. It might be your Pomona. That would be a great resource to use if your Pomona is active. So building these relationships will help you all in the long run. One of the things that you need to do is craft your message. And that means, what are we saying to who? And that's where your communication person comes in. That's where, if you have a publicist, somebody to work with you, and it's learning how to speak to different people in different ways. The message that I put on social media looks different than the message that I put in Good Day Magazine and potentially in the Patrons chain, because there are 3 different ways for me to get the same message out, 3 different platforms. It would also look different if I was just writing a press release to my newspaper. A press release is very different than an advertisement. So learning what's going to speak to the right people in the right place. And I think that's one thing, and it's not a failure on anybody's part, but is that we try to send the same message across every platform. It's sending a newsletter and putting the exact same thing that's in the newsletter in your newspaper, or putting it in an email, or putting it on Facebook. I think sometimes we get inundated with seeing the exact same thing over and over again, so we completely zone it out. We stop paying attention to it. Where one thing I think that Jonesboro Grange in Maine does very well is that they leverage their social media use in certain ways, and they also put different things in their local papers, and they're able to, make these connections. And because now they've been successful, their local paper is seeking them out and saying, what do you have going on? And I think that's one relationship that's really important to have, is your local paper. I realize that there aren't local papers in some communities. But one thing that certain communities have is a community Facebook page. I know there's one local to me that every time Eagle Grange does a meal, I post that we're doing a meal in this community Facebook page. and people respond to it because they've been waiting to see it come up. They've gotten used to seeing it, but they don't always know where to find that information until somebody shares it directly on that site. There are also, local community newsletters, community bulletins that are maybe once every other month, and you have to, really watch those deadlines and plan ahead for them. But there's one in my other hometown where I grew up called the Valley Vine that runs once a month, and it's 15, 20 pages long of just 8.5 paper stapled together. And it's not the most special thing, but it gets the word out. And so putting your information in those kind of things is very important, because there are people who read them. When I used to work for a theater company, there were people who noticed when my ads didn't run, because they would flip through and they'd say, "Oh, Phil, we didn't see a theater ad this week. What happened?" And I said, "Well, I just decided not to put one in this week." And they went, "Why? I was looking for it." And I was, "Well, thanks. At least I know somebody's connecting with it." So getting that feedback from your community is important too. One thing that I would like to do more of is asking people who come to our events, "Where did you hear about this?" Because were you contacted directly by phone? Did we call you because we knew that you came before? Did you get an email from us because you helped us out before? Or did you see it in a newspaper? Did you see it on Facebook? Where did we go right in this message? And then you can say, "Well, you know what? We spent money running a newspaper ad and nobody responded to it. So maybe that's not the best place for us to spread our message. Maybe our funds are better spent focusing somewhere else." Throwing $10 at a Facebook ad doesn't hurt. And then knowing how to use certain things. I've done a lot of social media workshops, so I'm not going to go into social media in depth right now, but I'm just going to say that one thing that's going to grab everybody's attention every time on social media is a video. Even if it's a 5 or 10-second video, if it's uploading a GIF or a GIF if you say it wrong, however you say that, that's something that on social media, those get leveraged by the app itself to rise to the top of people's news feeds, because there's something that somebody's going to stop and watch 10 seconds of. So even a short video that you can attach to your post in some way is going to draw people's attention to it. A small image is the same way. Images get leveraged over text-based posts every time. So including an image, including a video or a GIF is a really simple way to get your Facebook page's message higher in people's news feeds. And it's just something that you have to learn over time. And just because you're only putting tech stuff out doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. If it's working for you, it's working for you, and that's great. So I wish it worked more for me. If you're attempting to solve a community issue, one way to leverage your voice is hosting a Zoom conference. Not everybody can attend events in person, or attaching a virtual component to a live option. So for people who can't come to your town hall in person, say there will be a live stream available and somebody will be monitoring it if you have questions. And that's a great way to connect to, especially for evening events, people with children or families or people who are housebound, that you're able to connect to them and make them feel like they're a part of your community as well. The only voices that should be heard aren't the people who are mobile, aren't the people who are able to attend an 8 o'clock meeting on a Wednesday evening. I don't know who hosts those, but it's me. So those are some ways that you're able to craft your message and figure out if we're doing things right. If you're attempting to solve that community issue, some things that you need to ask yourself when crafting your message are, who are the stakeholders of this message? Who's being affected by this? So if you're looking at that highway thing that I was talking about earlier, where they're proposing this major highway to cut through prime central Pennsylvania farmland, figure out who the people that are being affected are, and get their stories, that you're able to share their stories and how they're going to be impacted, and how their impact, or how their effect is going to impact the rest of the community. If they're a major supplier of, I don't know, potatoes, then they're going to have to give up 40 acres of farmland, which is X amount of money that usually goes right back into our community. You're potentially hurting our community by doing this. And then you also can figure out what people in your community can help. Are they government officials? Is there a school board that can help? Is there, in the case of this farmland, can we get the Department of Ag involved, to save this land? County commissioners. If it's a very localized issue, is there a homeowners association that we can approach to say, hi, here's an issue that we've been brought, and we want to know how you can help us, or we can help you figure this out. A homeowners association, I think, would be a very specific idea that would come to a Grange, but it can happen. Your Grange might sit adjacent to a community that has that kind of governance. Okay, so that's enough about crafting messages. Then we move on to monitoring your progress. So you've got these plans. You've got your 1 year plan that's broken down into 1 month increments. How do you know that you're moving forward in the right amount of time? That's what Grange meetings are for, right? Gather your reports from your standing committees, from your special committees, to say, okay, here's our community action plan. Where are we today on this? And between those meetings, there are, of course, committee meetings. There are email and phone check-ins. There is reporting for measurable goals. So if at every meeting, you're saying, like, let's go back to that siding, that you need to raise $30,000. So every month you need to have that $500 going into a separate checking account to help you reach that goal. Make that part of your standing treasurer's report to say, we've reached our goal for the month. I know the church that I belong to, our sister church, we share a bulletin, and they're trying to reach their mortgage and pay off their mortgage. And they might have by this point. It's been a while since I've looked at the bulletin. But for a while, they were tracking that to say, in order for us to meet our mortgage payment, we need this much offering to come in this month. And they were making it a very public statement to say, we didn't meet our goal this month, so our mortgage payment had to come out of a different fund. Which is something that your Grange could do too, to say, we didn't raise enough money at our last meal that we can't support this program that we've been doing at the same level that we've done in the past. Which is kind of a way of shaming your Grange into participating more, which is maybe not the route that you want to go, but if it works for you, it works for you. The one thing I'll say about monitoring progress is that if you're the team leader, let your team do their work. Nothing is worse than somebody who's overbearing and nitpicky to the point of you saying, if you want this done your way, then maybe you should just take over. I think we've all potentially worked with people like that are so detail oriented, which is a good thing, but that they end up micromanaging your part of the project. And that's what we want to avoid as a leader. So we want to give people the autonomy and the power to proceed with their part of the mission. So if you give somebody the task of approaching a community leader, give them time to do that before you start checking in. And if using those SMART goals that we talked about earlier, maybe wait until 2/3 of the way through the time frame that you've given them. So if you've given them a month to report back and say, yep, I made contact, don't approach them in week 1 to start asking them right away if they've done it. Let them have the time that you've allotted them so that your project can move forward. So one thing with that is also knowing what resources you need for each step. It could be possible that John is in charge of step 3, but to start step 3, he needs resources that are coming from step 1. So he can't start until step 1 is completed, which might be when you start asking step 1 halfway through to say, hey, just need to know, have you started collecting these names yet? Have you started gathering this information yet? So that way we can move on with the project. That's a good way of keeping your team on task and keeping everything on track so that you'll reach your goals. And that also lets you know what outcomes are desired from each step. That's an important thing to put in your community action plan of saying, I know that step 1 is going to give us these results. So that way we can use the step 1 results in step 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way to the end of this project. And then you also get to examine what potential barriers stand in your way. If part of the thing that I need in step 1 is that the mayor is going to agree to let us do this, one of the potential barriers is going to be the mayor says no. So how can we move past that? So knowing, okay, so if we fail in step 1 and getting this approval, what's our backup plan? And that kind of creates these plans within a plan, these contingency plans, and that's fine. You're going to end up with those all over the place. If you know that you're not going to reach that $500 goal this month in your small steps, how can we make a backup plan to say, okay, well, we'll just have to work a little harder? Or is it, if we don't reach our $500 goal this month, at every meeting, we're going to put out a free will offering basket to try to make up that difference. And then if we don't meet it, is one of our goals that we're going to eventually have to raise our local dues for 2 years only, so that we can make up some of that difference. Those are all decisions that, of course, you can make. I would never suggest that you tax your members, which is what that becomes, because they're already volunteering their time and they're already volunteering to make this mission happen. So some other questions that you can ask during the whole process of creating an action roadmap, of while you're in something, if you are deep into something problematic and you're not able to get through, take a step back and ask yourself again, what is our guiding purpose? Is this step that I'm doing right now helping us achieve our purpose? Is it helping us achieve our mission and our vision? And does it serve our Grange in the way that we want it to? And if not, is this step necessary? Is this step important? Or am I investing a lot of time in something that's going to have a very small payoff at this moment? And it's not failure to step back in your goals. It's not, I think that's one thing that a lot of Granges are afraid of, is the idea of failure. But I think you'll also hear from a lot of people that you can't succeed without failing a few times. So if you've reached step 6 of a 7-step goal or a 7-step plan, and you realize that step 7 is just not going to happen, there's no shame in stepping back and saying, we didn't achieve our goal. And we'll talk about some other stuff here at the end about that. A question you can ask is, how do we leverage what we are doing for maximum community impact and engagement? And can we get volunteers from this? So a question, so it's a double-ended question to say, are we doing the most good we can from this project? And is this the kind of project that people will connect to and want to help us with if we go through round 2? I brought up the idea of a fun fair earlier. Very easy to do for year 1. Well, maybe it's something that succeeds very well in year 1. People came to, people enjoyed. So now you can say, if you enjoyed it, would you be willing to help us out in year 2 to make it bigger and better for our communities? Maybe you had one local food truck there in year 1. Well, now in year 2, local food truck 1 says, this was a great event for us, we want to come back. Maybe you can add a second component to it of a food truck rally, because everybody loves a food truck rally. So how can we add more components to it? And so that's maybe asking that one food truck to say, can you round up some of your friends, make sure this date is available, and see now how we can serve all of your food trucks and our Grange and our community in a larger event. And that's a great way too to say, one thing the Grange is not going to do at this fun fair is we are not going to sell our own food, because we have the food trucks here. So we're letting them reap the benefit and the profit of the food. We are going to take care of everything else and reap the benefit and the profit of everything else for the day, which is a great way to kind of split tasks and to make things a little more achievable. hey, that page is done. Okay, you've gone through the tasks. You've made it to the end. One thing that we all can do better, myself included, is to reflect and evaluate. I know the mission of the Grange goes on. I wore this shirt for a reason. The work of another day demands our attention. The work of the Grange keeps going. One thing that I need to do better for myself is to say, did that go well? Did our plan break down? Was it a success? What can I do better from here to make the next time we do this even better? That's for everything your Grange does, from fundraising for yourselves to maybe putting together care baskets for somebody for the holidays. Every time you can ask yourself, what can we do to make this easier, make it better, make it have a stronger impact? In the theater, that's what we call a post-mortem, which sounds morbid and sad. But it's literally looking at the death of the event that you just held to say, okay, it's over. We're putting it to bed. How can we use what we've learned to make next time better? And one really important thing is to make those notes and to leave the notes in the binder so that way whoever's in charge next time doesn't have to start at ground zero and figure it all out on their own. Look at the strengths and weaknesses of the event. What went really well? What could have gone better? Also look at the failures. I mean, some people are afraid to say our marketing wasn't great, or we failed at obtaining any talent for this talent show. That's something that you want to ask yourself, how can we do better at this next time? And if you completed a goal successfully, if you're on your 50-year plan of keeping the Grange alive and you've completed step 1, great. What's next? What's step 2? What's next? Where do we go from completing this? Your plans, your goals build on one another. A lot of them are happening simultaneously, and that's fine. And it's turning to the next person to say, hey, my part of this job of leading goal 1 is done. Let's move on to goal 2 now, and keep this rolling. And then every year or so, reevaluate your long-term goals as well and say, what have we succeeded in for the past year? Where can we be stronger? How can we impact our community better? How can we serve our mission better as a Grange? And then the final thing I want to say is how to retain your current members and volunteers. This all sounds daunting. It sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like somebody's going to be in charge. But how do we stop burnout? I think many of us who are on this Zoom would say burnout is a real thing. There's actually a great book on it called Burnout. I suggest the read if you'd like. But it's because we're doers. Those of us that are on, we dedicated the time tonight to be on this Zoom. We're also the people who are probably planning 7 different events for our Grange, and not just our Grange, but maybe our church and our PTA and maybe you're the president of your homeowners association, whatever it is. There's a lot of things that we are involved in. So one simple thing, and Pete has written on this before, is a thank you. Is recognizing the hard work that your members put in. It's not easy to say thank you sometimes. And it's especially if you're like me, it's also not easy to be thanked. I hate being recognized for the work that I've done. So often when an event is done, I'll just kind of do an Irish goodbye and slip out the back door and hope nobody saw. So it's knowing that it's good to say thank you. And it's also good to accept the thanks and accept the praise, accept the recognition when it's given. It sounds silly, but something as simple as a certificate of thanks, a handwritten thank you card. These are all things that people connect to and appreciate at a level that I think some people think is trivial. Like if somebody sends me a handwritten thank you card, it actually means a lot because it means somebody's taken the time out, not just to recognize that I've worked for them, but also to, handwrite and take time out of their day to make it personal. It's all one way to retain your members, like I said earlier, is using appropriate members for appropriate skills. I probably wouldn't send my 90-year-old member out to weed whack. Like, that's probably not something that's up their alley. But knowing that you might have a member who's in a nursing home who still wants to feel involved, take them a project that they can do. Whether that's folding cards. I know a lot of Granges collect stamps. I know that I'm in a Granger's house when I see the corner of an envelope torn off for stamps, because it's something that, at least in Pennsylvania, that we've done for a long time, donating these. So taking them and counting or sorting them is something that they can do, or potentially they're the person who can send out these thank you cards and write them themselves. Respect your members' time. Nothing's worse than being called in to say, hey, our workday is going to start at 9 a.m. and nothing starts until 11:30. That's then 2.5 hours of my time that I've been sitting around saying, when are we going to start? I want to know that when I'm dedicating and volunteering my time, that when I'm there, it's worth me being there. And that's something that I think here at Eagle Grange, we do pretty well, and that we say that our workday for our meal is going to start at 10. If I show up there at 10, there have already been people there for half an hour working, because they walked in the door and got started even before there was somebody in charge there. And that it's because we've got our meals down to a science at this point, I swear. That people know when I walk in, these are the things that have to happen, or your leader's there early and is able to get people started right away. I don't know what that word is. Regularly. Communicate regularly. And that's what I was talking about earlier. One way to respect your volunteers is to make sure they know what's happening. I think we've all potentially been on a volunteer team where the leader kind of goes MIA, and you're like, well, this was the step that I wanted to do, and I don't know where to go from here. Jeff, you're right. Having them show up at 10 and you showed up at 9 and have it done. Okay, don't be that leader either. Don't be the one who takes on the whole task by yourself. So respect, if you know that your volunteers are coming at 10, make sure there's work for them to do at 10. And then finally, the one thing that I say to respect your volunteers and retain your current members is to design a path to leadership if they want it. I think there are people who don't know they want to be leaders, and there are people who are in leadership positions who don't want to be there. So if you have members, if you have volunteers who are showing up to things, talk to them and say, do you want to be more involved? Do you want to step into a leadership role? Don't do it on the first time there. Don't scare them. But allow them time to get in and get settled and learn the people, and say, hey, you've been a fantastic asset for us over the last couple of times that you've been here. Is there something that is more that you'd want to take on? I think one thing that happens a lot, and especially in a lot of smaller Granges, is that somebody joins the Grange and they're immediately given an office and they don't know what to do, and they're not given the mentorship. So allow people the time to kind of learn if this is the right organization for them, and to learn if moving up to a leadership role is something that they want. And that's part of your roadmap, to say, you know, part of my 10-year plan is that I'm not going to be president anymore, for your Grange. You know, that's part of the plan, is that we're going to have a change in leadership. That's a good part of a 10-year plan. To say some of our leadership's going to change, and you don't need to be specific. You don't need to say all of our officers are going to be different, but it could just be, our 10-year plan is that we are going to adapt and move forward and encourage somebody new to step up. And that's where your roadmap for your internal roadmap can include a mentorship program. That's where it can include, we're going to send our officers to a leadership training. Maybe your chaplain has the ability to be president, but they just haven't tapped into those talents yet, and understand that it's something that they might want to try. So giving people the opportunities to advance is a really great way to to respect your members. And likewise, if a member says, I have no interest in being in charge, I'm very happy to just be a volunteer and have you do what you asked me to do, that's a great way to respect them too and let them stay in that position. We have volunteers at both of my Granges who are not members and don't want to be members because they say they're not the joining type, which is fine, but they come and they do the work with us. And that's just as valuable as your members in a lot of cases. So knowing that you're respecting them by saying, we're not going to ask you to join right now because it's not what you want. And it can take you a while to learn that about somebody. So that was a lot. I just dumped a whole lot on you guys. I will turn this into a PowerPoint. I promise. That's in my short-term community plan for myself. Is to make this a PowerPoint, to turn this into a presentation. I'll also, this was recorded tonight and will be going up on our YouTube channel. But does anybody have any questions? I'm not that good of a teacher, guys. Okay, well, if y'all are just going to be quiet tonight, I do have, yes, Steve, I can do a 1 to 2 page outline for you. I would be happy to do that. I did find some great resources through Indeed.com was a great help. A lot of what I found was geared more toward large nonprofits. So I kind of tailored this a little more toward the Grange. But I found a great quote on one of them that said, changing the world isn't something you do overnight. It requires careful planning, dedication, and foresight. And so that's what tonight is really about, is creating that plan and letting yourself know the steps to success. And sometimes it's hard to identify what the steps are until you're in the middle of it. And suddenly you're like, oh, we have steps A, B, and C. Well, now I need to add a step B.5 because I didn't think about the way to move from step B to step C. And guess I realized I just mixed letters and numbers, but we're going to go with that. B.5 is totally valid. So changing the plan is part of the action plan as well, is allowing yourself wiggle room to adjust and overcome challenges that have come up. Nothing that you're going to write is going to be perfect the first time that you put it on paper. So that's why you do the post-mortem evaluations, the reflections, is so that you can stop and say, you know what, we forgot to plan for these things. If you were planning an outdoor event and it rained, that could be a failure on your part because you never considered a rain date or an alternate location. You know, adding those things into your plan for the next time it's done is really important. Or potentially maybe there's a new newspaper in town or a new radio station that was on your list the first time that you realize that could have been a really good partnership that we didn't know about or didn't use or it didn't exist last time we did this. So learning from your mistakes or learning from your successes is really important as you move forward. So, any questions? Any comments?
Comments? I got a comment.
Sure, Pete.
You know I do.
Always.
But I think your point of, Grange is partnering with other organizations to achieve their goals. We're seeing that more all the time. We're seeing the successful Granges are the ones that realize they can't do it all themselves. They don't want to do it all themselves. And they're reaching out to the different organizations, like-minded organizations in their area and saying, hey, can we work on this together to achieve goals for both communities and both organizations? So, we got to kind of get rid of that mindset of we're going to do it ourselves and say, no, let's step back a little bit and let's say, as you said, everybody's got different skill sets and every organizations have different skill sets.
Yeah. So last night I was at, for those of you who tuned in mid brownie or cheesecake discussion, Last night I went to a very small Grange here in my county. They have 18 members and 4 junior members. And they're a wonderful Grange. They're doing their best. And they were actually last year, their very small community started a community yard sale. So this was hosted by the church at the other end of town, which is just down the street. So this year, Allegheny Grange is now like the starting point for these yard sales, and say, it starts on Carroll Hill Road. Allegheny Grange is a great place for you to stop and get some food, check out their yard sales. They've got the maps of what houses are selling. So they're one checkpoint, and then the church at the other end is the other checkpoint. And they've got this great partnership now, and it's only in year 2. So these are just going to keep getting bigger over the years. And last night they were talking about how they're out of space in their Grange Hall because enough vendors or enough people have already said that they want space, and now they're setting up pop-up tents outside as well, as additional space. So it was a great way for them. They were talking about ways that they're going to show off their Grange this coming Saturday, whenever these yard sales happen. Some plans that they have. Their junior members are all going to be there so they can talk about the Grange and the things that they've learned by participating both in their Grange and in our state junior program. And it's a great community partnership for them, because now everybody knows Allegheny Grange is vital to that community. This very small rural community that Grange is now literally a corner post for.
And I was going to bring that up. I just saw that where they're get your roadmap here.
Yeah.
And it's the second Grange I've seen in the country that is now the get your roadmap of the yard sales here. And like you said, talk about a great opportunity for a Grange to get their name out there. And as you said, community partnerships is such a great term. And even partnering with individuals.
Well, and as we talked about, the Grange had a net gain in membership this past year. And this year we're kind of on the wire, and it might be a second year in a row of a net gain for us. While other fraternal organizations like the Kiwanis and the Lions and the Elk are having a really hard time keeping their membership numbers up. And it's because I think so many of our Granges adapted and overcame during the pandemic and became that hub and that voice. But also we have fewer requirements of our members in some ways, of saying, we don't have as much, I don't know how I want to say it, but like,
well, I think the other thing
we don't have like a membership test. There's no membership test to join the Grange, which
we as an organization realized during the pandemic, all the issues, guys, you do what you need to do. If you need to reinvent yourself, reinvent yourself. You don't need our permission, but you know what needs to be done in your community. You know how to help your community. Go do it. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'll put together this roadmap plan. I'll figure it out, put it into a 1 or 2 pager for you. I'll put together the PowerPoint. All of it will be available in the membership section of the National Grange website. As well, this I'll have edited and up on our YouTube channel probably early next week, since we are off for Memorial Day holiday this weekend. So thank you all for being here tonight, spending part of your Wednesday night with me. I appreciate y'all.
Phil, I've got
Rob, hi.
How interesting. Good. How are you doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
I just had the president of our Grange in Greenfield Hill Grange in the rather affluent town of Fairfield, Connecticut, contacted me, and she was asking about her interest is to come up with a capital campaign for her Grange, because it's in an affluent town with a lot of big companies, one of which is Bigelow Tea. And she was asking me if I knew of any Granges that had written capital campaign plans. And I know of none, because I don't know of any Granges that have ever been that forward thinking. But I was thinking in terms of what you're saying with coming up with a roadmap, a community action roadmap, that might sort of fit in with
absolutely,
a campaign to develop some kind of income from wealthy corporations who are looking for a tax deductible donation to a fraternal organization. So one, her name is Stephanie Thompson. I'm going to recommend this program once it goes up for her to watch it and to start tuning in to these, as well as the membership matters
Yeah.
programs too, because I think she would get a lot out of them. But if she has any questions, if you hear from her, Stephanie Thompson, I'm going to mention your name as a contact and resource on the communications matters for her, because she's a new leader. Got a lot of questions, a lot of concerns.
Don't we all?
Yes. And I think she appreciates guidance from more experienced people who have had more years in the Grange. I think she's been a member maybe 4 or 5 years now, something like that. But yeah, so
Yeah,
if you hear from her,
capital campaign's not something I've heard of a Grange doing.
well, I never have either. I
Well-
don't know of any Grange so forward thinking to come up with that. But then again, not many live in a community like hers that has all of this wealth that they would like to try to tap into. I mean,
I
she
would,
was
I
telling
would
me,
check
yeah,
Antrim Grange in New Hampshire
yeah,
and Cresswell Grange in Oregon.
Oh, I forgot about
okay,
that.
I would start there. They're both on Facebook. They've been working on their Grange halls for a long time.
yeah, okay,
So I know they do some community work, Bob. I'm not sure, they're not in affluent. Trust me when I tell you, they're not in affluent areas, but they have a plan.
okay. I mean, this Grange has a very large Grange hall, which is about twice as big as the average Grange hall, and about half an acre of property, which I estimate in that community is probably worth at least $1 million, if not more.
Wow.
I mean, how many of us have $1 million Grange halls? I know there's 2 Granges in Connecticut that are in such a position that I know of. That one and another that's close to that value.
Wow.
That's how the other half lives.
I can dream.
I always joke with my wife, we live one town the wrong side of the Housatonic River for such wealth.
I live, Williamsport was once the logging capital of the United States, and I certainly don't live here at the right time.
We're in New Haven County, but if you moved our farm across the river to Fairfield County, it would probably be worth twice as much. But then again, I'd pay twice as much or more in taxes. So I'm perfectly happy to be in,
Give and take.
Commonplace New Haven County.
Well, again, thank you all for being here tonight. Anytime you want to get in contact with me, if you have questions, concerns, anything like that, feel free to email me, pvanada@nationalgrange.org. And I will see y'all soon. Thanks for being here tonight.